Dragon Punch, Shenlong, Shoryuken. Perhaps one of, if not the most recognizable move in fighting game history. But why is it so iconic? Why is the Shoryuken so important? Today we're going over both the history of the move and what makes it so important that practically every single fighting game has their own version of it. No time to waste, this is going to be a long one, so let's get right into it, starting at the very beginning, Street Fighter 1. Street Fighter 1, released in 1987, is considered by many to be more a precursor to the fighting game genre rather than the first entry in it. It includes Street Fighter's standard 6-button layout, jump system, and most importantly, the introduction of the special move. Special moves in Street Fighter were inputted by performing a series of directional inputs before hitting the corresponding button to do the attack. However, here they were treated less like an integral part of a character's moveset and more like a secret top-level technique. They were incredibly hard and inconsistent to input, and had much higher damage output than what became typical for the genre. In addition, there were only 3 special moves accessible by the player, those being the Hadouken, the Tatsumaki, and the Shoryuken. The Shoryuken was easily the hardest to input out of the 3, so difficult that in Street Fighter 1, it could even instantly KO the opponent. The depiction of the Shoryuken in Street Fighter 1 made it seem like an all-powerful finishing technique, but in 1992, when Street Fighter 2 hit the arcades, things were different. Street Fighter 2, along with many other system-level changes, made special inputs significantly easier to perform. So significantly that you could now rely on inputting them reliably and work them into your fighting style. Because of this, leaving the Shoryuken as an ultimate instant kill technique would never work, and so, the Shoryuken was given the niche it has had for the rest of fighting game history. Reversal. A change to an opposite direction, position, or course of action. To change the flow of battle. That is what the Shoryuken was intended for in Street Fighter 2. So, what did they change to make the Shoryuken so impactful and integral to fighting game design that it has stayed practically the same for over 20 years? 1. Invincibility. After inputting the move, the player is granted a few frames in which they are completely invulnerable to all attacks, effective immediately. This meant you could use it when under attack from the opponent to turn the tides into your favor. However, such a strong benefit could not come without downsides, and the Shoryuken came with 2 major weaknesses even in its first iteration. First, its input. You see, it's no accident that the Shoryuken ended up with its infamous forward, down, forward motion. There's a very good reason as to why this input is chosen, and to put it simply, it gives the move a risk. In most all 2D fighting games, you have to be holding backwards to block. While you're inputting a Shoryuken, you are constantly holding forward. This means that no matter how fast you are, while inputting a Shoryuken, there is always a brief period of time where you are vulnerable to the opponent's attacks. Second, the Shoryuken was punishable on block. If the enemy waited for the reversal attempt and successfully blocked it, they could end up dealing major damage as a reward for baiting it out. Third, the Shoryuken had limited range. This meant that you had to constantly be aware of your positioning at all times, as if the enemy was just an inch too far away, you could easily throw the round away by whiffing the move. These balancing mechanisms made the Shoryuken still feel like the powerful technique it was meant to be in Street Fighter 1, while also adding the much-needed balance to the move that impacted fighting games as a whole for the better. The benefit of having immediate invulnerability is understandable to anyone, and there are dozens of applications where the Shoryuken shows its power, the most important being after a knockdown. If inputted while the player is rising from the ground, the Shoryuken's invulnerability will start just as the player rises from the ground, effectively removing the weakness of its input-stopping blocks, as you are already in an invulnerable state after being knocked down in the first place. Equally as important is its use to escape pressure. In fighting games, there are many ways for many characters to put themselves in an advantageous position where after forcing a blocked move, their next move will come out before their opponent's will. This is called frame advantage, and Shoryuken is the only way to completely deny it. If you're completely invincible during the Shoryuken startup, then they can't push their offense after gaining frame advantage, as they would end up getting hit by the Shoryuken as they try to press an attack. This concept can also be applied in neutral, where the Shoryuken serves an important role as a counterpoke. If you are able to read when your opponent will press an attack in neutral, then using Shoryuken is the best way to punish them for taking the risk to attack. Of course, this itself is very risky, as the Shoryuken is punishable if blocked or whiffed, but high-level players with deep understanding of the game can use the benefit of the Shoryuken's invincibility very effectively when playing the neutral game. With all that being said, the Shoryuken isn't only useful as a reversal either. The Shoryuken, while more difficult to input than a standard quarter circle special, often results in a large chunk of damage as well as a knockdown, meaning landing it puts your character into a very advantageous state. This means comboing into a Shoryuken is often a better idea than comboing into a different special. However, it isn't as simple as it may seem. First, the input is trickier to pull off after reacting to the landing of an attack. Second, its range is limited, meaning you need to be aware of the spacing of your attack before attempting to combo into it. Finally, if you attempt to cancel into it haphazardly without first reacting to whether your starting attack was blocked or hit, you can end up being punished for the attempted combo. It is for this reason that the Shoryuken also exists as a dynamic combo ender. Many characters have special cancels that will result in a combo as well as keep the player safe if an opponent blocks, but those specials won't give the damage, knockdown, or advantage that the Shoryuken does. If you want to truly optimize your gameplay, you must learn the ways of Shenlong. The final typical use of the Shoryuken is as an anti-air. The move sends the player character rising high into the air, which can hit an opponent jumping in on its user. Combined with its invulnerability to whatever airborne attack the opponent might be using, the Shoryuken makes for one potent jump denial option. It should be easy to see how dynamic the Shoryuken is just in its base form, but this was only barely the start. In Street Fighter II, there were a few different variations of the Shoryuken that also went on to shape the way fighting games developed the move. The Flash Kick, Guile's trademark reversal. Similar in function to the Shoryuken, but entirely different in form. The first and most notable difference is its input. As opposed to a forward, down, down, forward motion, the Flash Kick was inputted by holding down for a specific duration of time, then flicking upwards. This difference alone changes the move astronomically compared to its motion input brother, and the reasons are fairly simple to understand. 1. You have to charge it. Unlike a Shoryuken, which can be performed anytime you wish by inputting the correct commands, you have to be holding down for a set amount of time before being able to use the special move. This means you cannot use it on reaction, only on prediction. You must have been holding down beforehand in order to be able to use the Flash Kick when the time comes. However, this downside comes with two immensely powerful benefits. 1. Once you have the charge, the input for Flash Kick is near instantaneous. All you have to do is flick up and press a button, making it much more reliable as a reversal. Second, you can be blocking while charging. This means when Guile has a Flash Kick charged, he immediately turns into a defensive powerhouse who can activate his reversal in a moment's notice. On top of all that, the Flash Kick also has a bigger radius than the Shoryuken, meaning it can be used on longer range opponents as well as opponents higher in the air. Finally, and most uniquely, the Flash Kick doesn't actually have invulnerability. Well, full invulnerability. The Flash Kick is immune to projectiles, and has upper body invulnerability, meaning that the top half of Guile's hitbox disappears, but not the bottom. So it can be used as a reversal in all the situations the Shoryuken can, but if the opponent goes for a low kick, you're still going to get hit by it. Even when we just look at the Shoryuken itself, there are differences between the characters who use it. Ryu, Ken, and Sagat all have the Shoryuken, but their versions of the move are slightly different. Ryu and Sagat's are practically identical, barring Sagat's new name for the technique, both being the one-hit knockdown uppercut we've been familiarized with from Street Fighter I. But Ken's Shoryuken is different. His light Shoryuken functions identically to Ryu's, but his medium and heavy ones are unique. Ken's Shoryuken is a multi-hit attack, with the medium version hitting twice and the heavy version, now with a brand new flame effect, hitting 3 times. Only the final hit will cause a knockdown, meaning that Ken's Shoryukens are a little less consistent than Ryu's in Street Fighter II. That being said, they can also be more reliable as an anti-air thanks to their greater horizontal and vertical distance, and they do more damage and stun as well. Small differences between the two, but the two moves grow increasingly more unique as the Street Fighter series continues. You may think we're done with Street Fighter II, but a later addition to the game introduced yet another type of Shoryuken onto the battlefield. Street Fighter II Turbo featured a super meter that when filled, gave characters access to an ultra-powerful one-time attack unique to each character that uses it. Ryu got a more powerful Hadoken, but Ken got the Shoryu ripoff. This depiction of the Shoryuken is much more akin to the Street Fighter I appearance of the move as an ultra-powerful finishing technique, dealing over half the opponent's life bar and defining what was the start of Ken's gravitation to a more Shoryuken-centric fighting style. So we've just finished a 4-page history lesson on the origins of the Shoryuken. and yet we still haven't definitively answered the question posed at the beginning of this video, that being, what specifically makes the Shoryuken so iconic and interesting that allowed it to cement itself as a fighting game and pop culture icon for the rest of history? And while everything I've mentioned up until now is part of the reason, to summarize it down to a simple statement, I would ascertain that the Shoryuken is so iconic because of its depth. The Shoryuken is possibly one of the most dynamic tools in any video game, period, at the time of its creation. Its thousands of unique uses and benefits come with thousands of unique counters and drawbacks, its input balancing it perfectly with its effects in battle. All of these things make it blindingly obvious that the Shoryuken is no dime a dozen technique. But hey, how can I expect you to believe me without any concrete proof of what I'm saying? On paper, sure, the Shoryuken seems amazing, but does it end up working anything like that in the game? Is the Shoryuken so unique and interesting that players can design entire playstyles around it so effectively that simply how a player uses this one move can speak volumes about their entire fighting game experience? To answer this question, let's take a look at the living example of the Shoryuken's depth, none other than legendary fighting game player Daigo Umehara. Daigo, the Beast, is well known as probably the best fighting game player throughout history. His list of accomplishments and techniques is insurmountable, sporting thousands upon thousands of merits only he could fulfill. But high on the peak of his unique technique, one talent of Daigo's stands tall. That talent is the Ume Shoryu. To quote the fighting game glossary, the Ume Shoryu is a psychic Shoryuken done at an unexpected time that hits your opponent, made famous by the fighting game legend Daigo Umehara. The Shoryu is done pretty much out of nowhere, and it has to actually hit. It's not an Ume Shoryu if it doesn't work. You see, Daigo was infamous for his absurdly timed Shoryukens. Most people would only use them whenever they were most likely to work, such as after a wake-up or after the opponent makes a mistake. Not Daigo. Daigo used the Shoryuken whenever he wanted. Using its invincibility to phase through an opponent's attack, Daigo would Shoryuken whenever the opponent tried to do anything, no matter the position. It didn't matter if Daigo already had advantage. It didn't matter if the Shoryuken was too far away to hit the opponent unless they stuck out a long-range button. Daigo would do it anyways. And it worked. Every single time. Like the glossary said, a psychic Shoryuken. Daigo was so good at performing the Ume Shoryu, named after himself of course, that many actually believed he had a mind-reading psychic ability. Whether it's true that Daigo is a mind reader, or perhaps a super genius, we will never know. What we do know is that he is a living example of the depth and mind-crushing mental game that the Shoryuken provides. Ryu and Ken, the masters of the Shoryuken, and the definitive users of the technique. Sagat, the user of the Tiger Uppercut, same in form and function, but adapted for his own use. Guile, the pioneer of the invincible reversal, created and defined a new type of Shoryuken later separated entirely from its origin. These were the four who started it all, and in 1996, these Shoryuken masters were given their first apprentice. The release of Street Fighter Alpha 2 added a number of characters to the Street Fighter roster, and one from among the pack stands out as a user of a Shoryuken more unique than any others we've seen so far. The character I'm referring to is Sakura. While sporting the same basic moveset as Ryu and Ken, Sakura's moves have unique properties similar to Ken's multi-hit in Street Fighter 2, but to a much higher degree. Sakura's Shoryuken also hits multiple times, but its true defining factor is its vertical range. Sakura's Shoryuken travels almost half screen as she gets a running start, taking her farther the higher button strength is inputted. This means Sakura can hit Shoryukens from farther than ever, making her combos and confirms all the more deadly. However, this benefit comes with the drawback that during the running start, Sakura loses the invulnerability of the typical Shoryuken. Back to Ryu and Ken, not a lot changed about their Shoryukens. Although this time around, Ryu gets a Shoryuken super of his own, Metsu Shoryuken. Ken gets a second Shoryuken super in the form of Shinryuken as well. At this point, flash kicks had been cemented as an entirely different beast from the Shoryuken, with Charlie being the second user in the Street Fighter series of the move. Of course, Sagat still had his Tiger Uppercut, and he also gained a Shoryuken super by the name of Tiger Genocide. His Tiger Uppercut now multi-hits as well. More interestingly was Akuma, who I refrained from mentioning, is now an actual roster character as opposed to a secret banned addition. He both has Shoryuken and a Shoryuken Super, called Misatsu Shoryuken. His Shoryuken multi-hits as well, leaving Ryu as the only character with a single-hit Shoryuken. And while this was the current peak of relevancy for the Shoryuken inside of Street Fighter itself, over the past few years, the move started to show up in other titles, with slightly different names of course, but the same property. Terry's Rising Tackle functions like a flash kick, Sol and Kai's Volcanic Viper and Vapor Thrust respectively, Haomaru's Ogi Kozetsuzan, and Dimitri's Demon Cradle, to name a few. The Shoryuken was starting to gain traction outside of the game it was initially introduced to. However, that raises the question, what should we call this type of move? It's becoming more and more plentiful, but we can't just keep calling it Shoryuken. That's the name of a specific reversal, not all of them as a whole. So the FGC came up with a new term, DP, short for Dragon Punch, which is the English translation for Shoryuken. Short, to the point, and a blanket term that covers any moves with the typical properties of the one move that started it all. The final thing to note about Alpha 2 is how the Shoryuken worked with the custom combo system. You see, custom combo allows you to cancel any move into any move in an infinite juggle state, which often meant that the most optimal combo for characters with DPs was to just keep doing them with some other stuff sprinkled in. For Ryu, this was a one and done in Alpha, but for Ken, this pushed his DP affinity a little further in subsequent games. After Street Fighter Alpha came Street Fighter 3, which much like Alpha released in 3 separate editions. This game is unique among Street Fighters for replacing most all of the cast with new characters who perform similar functions to the old one. Remy is a Guile function, and his Rising Rage Flash functions similarly to a Flash Kick. Oro has Oni Yanma, which is hard to call a Flash Kick due to the fact that he performs the standard uppercut of a Shoryuken, but is inputted with the Flash Kick command. Sean replaces Sakura, and his Dragon Punch is a DP, although it does not multi-hit, meaning Ryu is alone no longer. Ibuki has Kazakiri, Dudley has Jet Uppercut, but even with all these new reversals, they still weren't the biggest change to the Shoryuken in Street Fighter 3. Street Fighter 3, specifically the second Impact release, saw the introduction of EX moves. EX moves were powered-up versions of specific special moves that costed a chunk of super meter. Pretty much every DP had an EX variant, and they allowed the devs to do something very interesting with the DPs that they couldn't do before. You see, with DPs before, it was either all or nothing. You either got the invincible reversal we know and love, or you didn't. But in Street Fighter 3, some moves both had invuln and didn't at the same time. A few DPs only had invuln on their EX versions, while their normal versions simply had the upper body invuln a Flash Kick typically has. This also meant that Flash Kicks could get invuln of their own, and Remy's EX Rising Rage Flash got just that. Sean's Dragon Smash only had EX invuln. Same with Oro's. Same with Ryu's. In fact, the only meterless, completely invincible reversals were Ken and Akuma's Shoryukens. This marked the first time that DPs were separated from their invuln, albeit still usable in their old form by spending bar, but Street Fighter 3 was the first Street Fighter to drop meterless reversals for all but 2 of their characters. In regards to changes between Ken and Ryu, this game is where Ken really started to lean into his more Shoryuken-based playstyle, and funnily enough, it has nothing to do with his Shoryuken at all. Back in Street Fighter Alpha 3, Ken got a new super called Shippu Jinrai Kyaku, which is pretty consistently one of his best supers. It's got high burst damage and can be comboed into very effectively from certain moves, with one of those being the Shoryuken. This meant while fighting Ken in Street Fighter 3, you always have to be aware of the threat that is Shoryuken into Shippu Jinrai, making his offense all the more scarier. And considering Ken could confirm from strong low pokes like crouching medium kick into Shoryuken, then into Shippu Jinrai, this meant Ken would be fishing for that super a lot, and by extension, the Shoryuken that comes before it. Street Fighter 3 marked the time period where fighting game developers started to experiment with DPs. Many decided to take the route of making DPs have invuln only through use of meter, just as many kept them the same, and a few of them tried more unique approaches. And a more unique approach is exactly what we see in the 2008 release of Street Fighter 4. Although, while most fighting games were attempting to make the invincible reversal weaker, Street Fighter 4 actually made it much stronger through its system mechanic changes. First and foremost, meterless invincible reversals were back. Most characters with a DP could get full invuln with just a standard version of the DP without having to spend meter on the EX. The second reason DPs were so much stronger in Street Fighter IV was due to the technique FADC. The Focus Attack Dash Cancel, or FADC, was a high-level technique present in all versions of Street Fighter IV, which is best known for allowing invincible reversals to be completely safe on block and even allow for devastating combos on hit. The way it works is simple. After a move connects in Street Fighter IV, you have the option of using the game's unique mechanic, the Focus Attack, to cancel that move's recovery at the cost of 1 bar of meter. From this point, you could cancel the Focus Attack into a dash, which in most circumstances would leave your character unpunishable. This was most effectively applied to DPs, where after using one on your wake-up, you could spend a bar to make the DP completely safe on block. Of course, this could be baited by a backdash as you can't FADC on whiff, but this meant that the person on offense would have to sacrifice their Okizeme to go for the bait, and if the opponent didn't DP, then they would get a chance to reset neutral. The FADC meant that characters without DPs were at a vast disadvantage against those who had them. This isn't to say that there weren't any strong characters without DPs, just that having one was a much more valuable trait in Street Fighter IV than it had been in any Street Fighter, or any fighting game for that matter, prior. As I mentioned previously, FADCs allowed characters to land devastating combos, and funnily enough, Ryu's DP into FADC was much more dangerous than Ken's in Street Fighter IV thanks to Ryu's amazing Ultra, meaning that it was actually Ryu who would be fishing for the DP more than Ken. But Ryu's Ultra was a fireball, while Ken had a DP as one of his Ultras himself, so we'll let it slide. Of course, Ken and Ryu have deviated very far from one another at this point outside of their Shoryukens, but for the topic of this video, that's not really of utmost importance. 2016 saw the release of Street Fighter V, which is currently the most recent entry in the Street Fighter series, not counting expansions and new additions. Street Fighter V initially released with all DPs having meterless invuln, same as Street Fighter IV, but come Season 2, they changed that and made it so no DPs had meterless invuln, and you had to use an EX DP to have it. This sparked controversy among the fighting game fanbase at the time, and some people are still upset about the decision, but at this point the change has been around long enough, it'd be strange if they ever went back on it. Other than that, Street Fighter V is the peak of Ken's Shoryuken-centric playstyle, so much so that him and his DP were the front of many meme pages for some time after the game's release. You see, Ken's Shoryuken still did great damage and stun, but this time around, Ken actually had combos that allowed him to use multiple Shoryukens in one combo, meaning you'd be seeing Ken's DP a whole hell of a lot when fighting against him. This was only further reinforced with the introduction of Ken's second V-Trigger come Arcade Edition, which was Shinryuken. Even more comical was the fact that Shinryuken itself could combo into more Shoryukens, fully and completely cementing Ken as the DPing maniac we know him as today. Of course, with Street Fighter V's massive roster of 45 characters, many characters had invincible reversals of some sort. Before I go down the list, remember that all invincible DPs in this game are EX only, and no character has a true meterless reversal. With that being said, of course Ken, Ryu, Sakura, and Akuma have their Shoryukens, Karin gets Kouken, Chun-Li has Spinning Bird Kick, Cammy has Cannon Spike, Nikali has Raging Light, Guile has Flash Kick, Urien has Headbutt, Juri has Tensenrin, Ibuki has Kazakiri, Sagat has Tiger Uppercut, Ed has Psycho Upper, Falk has Psycho Schneid, Kage gets a Shoryuken of his own, Lucia has Hurricane Spinner, Seth has Mad Cradle, Dan has his Koryuken, not to be confused with Shoryuken, Rose has Soul Spiral, Oro has Oni Yanma, and Akira has Hotenshu. That puts us at a total of 22 invincible reversals out of 45 playable characters, a little less than half the cast. And with Street Fighter V wrapped up, we have officially made it through all the main series Street Fighter titles, meaning we've arrived at the end of the Shoryuken's road. Now while this may be where the Shoryuken ends for now, Capcom has stated that they are working on Street Fighter VI, so who knows, maybe they'll come up with a new way to shake up this mechanic once more. If we take a look outside of Street Fighter once more, we can see that Shoryukens exist one way or another in almost every modern and retro fighting game around, most keeping them the tried and true way of meterless invuln, but some using Street Fighter V's practice of EX-only invuln, and of course, some games are even getting more creative than that. Of note is Arc System Works' latest fighting game Guilty Gear Strive, which keeps the meterless strike invuln for DPs, but removes the throw invuln they've had from the very start. Will the DP continue to grow and develop as time goes on, or will fighting game devs finally all agree on what the important balancing levers for it are? Only time will tell. But for now, if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and consider supporting me on Patreon as well. If you enjoyed this longer documentary-style video, be sure to let me know in the comments down below so that I know whether or not to make another one. For now though, that's all. This has been Adventure, and I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.